On the 9th of March, 1898, César Ritz walked through the gleaming lobby of the Savoy Hotel for the last time. The electric chandeliers, the ones he had helped make famous, cast their brilliant light across marble floors that reflected his distorted image back at him. He was the most celebrated hotelier in the world, architect of modern luxury hospitality, the man who had transformed a chaotic theatrical lodging house into Europe's most prestigious address. But in his coat pocket sat a letter from the board of directors, and it contained a single devastating word: embezzlement. What the guests sipping champagne in the dining room did not know, what the newspapers would never fully report, was that the Savoy's founding genius had been stealing from his own masterpiece for years. Chapter 1: When Theater Money Built a Palace of Light. Richard D'Oyly Carte made his fortune selling opera tickets to the middle class, and he had a dangerous idea about what to do with it. By 1887, Carte controlled the most successful theatrical enterprise in Britain. His Savoy Theatre on the Strand had made him wealthy beyond measure, staging the comic operas of Gilbert and Sullivan to packed houses night after night. The Mikado alone had run for 672 performances. Pirates of Penzance had toured 3 companies simultaneously across England. The partnership had transformed comic opera from aristocratic entertainment into middle-class obsession, and the money flowed accordingly. But Carte was not a man satisfied with repetition. He was an obsessive modernizer, fascinated by technological innovation in an era when most of his peers remained skeptical of change. While other theater owners relied on gaslighting, Carte had made his Savoy Theatre the first public building in the world to be lit entirely by electricity. The experiment had succeeded beyond imagination. Audiences came as much to witness the electric lights as to see the performances. Now he wanted to do it again, bigger, more ambitious, more permanent. The idea came to him during a tour of European hotels. Everywhere he traveled, the finest establishments were dark, cramped, antiquated. Gaslighting created smoky atmospheres and fire hazards. Rooms lacked basic amenities. Service was inconsistent, staff poorly trained. The grandest hotels in Paris and Vienna operated on systems unchanged since the previous century. Carte saw opportunity where others saw tradition. He would build a hotel unlike anything London had ever witnessed. It would occupy an entire block of the Strand, overlooking the Thames. Every room would have electric lighting, hot and cold running water, elevators powered by hydraulics. The staff would be trained to continental standards. The restaurant would rival the finest in Europe. It would be a palace of modernity, a declaration that the future had arrived in London. The establishment reacted with predictable horror. A hotel lit entirely by electricity? Absurd. Dangerous. Unnecessary. Gaslighting had served perfectly well for generations. Who would pay premium rates to sleep beneath the harsh glare of electric bulbs? The whole scheme reeked of theatrical showmanship, which is exactly what it was. Carte ignored them all, and he had built his theatrical empire by understanding what audiences wanted before they knew they wanted it. He would do the same with hospitality. In 1888, he purchased the plot of land. He hired the architect Thomas Edward Colcutt, instructing him to design a building that would showcase electrical innovation in every possible way. The budget was extraordinary, £180,000, equivalent to more than £20 million in modern currency, for a hotel. The sum scandalized London's financial district, but Carte was wagering on something his critics did not understand. He was betting that luxury itself was about to be redefined, that wealth would increasingly demand not tradition, but innovation, that the future belonged to those who could deliver seamless comfort through invisible technology. He was also betting on one other thing, that somewhere in Europe there existed the perfect person to run his impossible vision. Someone who understood service as theater, who could transform hospitality into performance art, who possessed the fanatical attention to detail necessary to make every guest feel as though the entire hotel existed solely for their comfort. Richard D'Oyly Carte was about to meet César Ritz. Chapter 2. The Swiss Waiter Who Understood Desire. César Ritz arrived in London in 1889 with a reputation for reading the unspoken needs of millionaires. He was 40 at the time, a self-made man who had clawed his way up from poverty through sheer psychological precision. Born in the Swiss village of Niederwald, the youngest of 13 children, Ritz had been dismissed from his first hotel job for incompetence. The manager told him he would never make anything of himself in hospitality. That rejection became his obsession. Ritz understood something fundamental about luxury service. It was not about efficiency or even quality, though both mattered. It was about anticipation, about creating the sensation that your needs were understood before you articulated them, about making powerful people feel cared for in ways they had never experienced, even in their own homes. At the Grand Hotel National in Lucerne, he had pioneered techniques that would become industry standard. He memorized the preferences of returning guests. He trained staff to observe without intruding. He insisted that service should be invisible, that the machinery of hospitality should never reveal itself. When a guest wanted champagne, it should appear as if summoned by thought alone. His breakthrough came in Monte Carlo. The Grand Hotel was struggling, bleeding guests to competitors, operating at a loss despite its prime location. Ritz arrived as manager and transformed it within a single season. He gutted the dining room and rebuilt it according to principles of theatrical staging. He hired the young chef, Auguste Escoffier, then unknown, and gave him complete authority over the kitchen. Together, Ritz and Escoffier created something unprecedented. They synchronized service and cuisine as performance. Meals were timed to musical precision. Dishes arrived at the exact temperature for maximum flavor. Staff moved through the dining room like dancers, never rushing, never hesitating. The experience was so perfectly orchestrated that guests forgot they were being served at all. The transformation was immediate. European aristocracy descended on Monte Carlo not just to gamble, but to dine. Russian Grand Dukes, German industrialists, British nobility. They came to witness what Ritz had created, this seamless fusion of cuisine and service that made dining feel like a private revelation. Word reached London. Word reached D'Oyly Carte. The two men met in Paris in early 1889. Carte explained his vision, a hotel that would define modern luxury, that would use electricity and technology to create unprecedented comfort. But technology alone meant nothing without someone who could translate it into human experience. He needed Ritz. Carte made an extraordinary offer, complete operational control. Carte would handle financing and construction. Ritz would handle everything else: staffing, training, menu design, service philosophy. Ritz would be general manager with authority superseding everyone except Carte himself. There was one condition: Ritz must bring Escoffier. Ritz accepted immediately. This was the opportunity he had spent 20 years preparing for. A chance to build the perfect hotel from inception, to implement every theory he had developed about service and anticipation. to create a temple of hospitality that would eclipse everything Europe had ever witnessed. He understood the risks. London was not Monte Carlo. British tastes were conservative. The entire concept depended on technology that had never been deployed at this scale. If the electrical systems failed, if the hydraulic lifts malfunctioned, if continental service alienated British guests, the entire enterprise would collapse. But Ritz was a gambler in his own way. He gambled on perfectionism. He believed that if the execution was flawless, the concept would succeed. What neither Ritz nor Carte fully understood yet was that their partnership contained a fatal flaw. Carte believed he was hiring a genius manager. What he was actually hiring was a genius manager with a compulsion for theft that not even Ritz himself fully recognized. The stage was set. The hotel would open in 4 months. Chapter 3. Opening Night, when London saw the future. On the 6th of August, 1889, 70,000 electric bulbs illuminated the Savoy's facade, visible from across the Thames. The spectacle stopped traffic on the Strand. Crowds gathered on the riverbank to witness the building blazing with light against the summer darkness. It looked like a vision from the next century, impossibly bright, almost unreal. Gas-lit London had never seen anything approaching this intensity of illumination. Inside, the hotel was equally transformative. The lobby featured marble floors imported from Italy, walls paneled in rare woods, electric chandeliers that cast steady light instead of the flickering glow of gas flames. The elevators, the first in a British hotel, carried guests smoothly between floors. Every one of the 268 rooms had its own bathroom with hot and cold running water. In 1889, London, this was revolutionary. Most hotels still relied on chamber pots and communal washrooms. The technology was astonishing, but Ritz understood that technology alone would not sustain the hotel. What mattered was the feeling created by the technology, the sensation of effortless comfort, the elimination of every minor inconvenience that plagued traditional hotels. He had spent months training the staff according to his exacting standards. Waiters learned to anticipate needs through observation. Housekeepers were instructed to clean rooms in precise sequences, leaving no trace of their presence. The concierge desk became an intelligence network, tracking guest preferences and dietary restrictions. When a regular patron returned, their favorite room was prepared exactly as they preferred it, down to the brand of soap and the temperature of the bath water. The restaurant became the centerpiece. Escoffier designed a menu that balanced French sophistication with British comfort. He pioneered the brigade system, organizing the kitchen into specialized stations that operated with military coordination. Dishes that previously required hours of preparation were streamlined to ensure consistent quality at scale. But the real innovation was psychological. Ritz insisted that service should feel personal, even in a hotel serving hundreds of guests simultaneously. Staff were trained to remember names, to recognize faces, to create the illusion of individual attention within mass hospitality. Opening night exceeded every expectation. The guest list read like a directory of European power. The Prince of Wales attended, lending royal approval to the enterprise. The continental aristocrats, who had doubted that London could produce anything approaching Parisian standards, found themselves astonished. The technology worked flawlessly. The food rivaled anything in France. The service was seamless. The press reaction was euphoric. The Times declared the Savoy a triumph of modern engineering and refined taste. The Illustrated London News published engravings of the electric-lit lobby and proclaimed it a glimpse of the 20th century. Within weeks, the hotel was fully booked months in advance. Richard D'Oyly Carte had gambled £180,000 on an untested concept, and the gamble had succeeded beyond imagination. The Savoy became the most prestigious address in London overnight. Aristocrats competed for reservations. Industrialists held business dinners in the restaurant. The hotel became the site where old wealth and new wealth mingled, where European sophistication met British power. César Ritz had proven his theories correct. Luxury was not about opulence for its own sake. It was about invisible systems creating visible comfort, about technology serving human desire without revealing its machinery, about making the extraordinary feel effortless. Standing in the electric-lit lobby on opening night, surrounded by champagne and celebration, neither Carte nor Ritz could have imagined that their triumph contained the seeds of catastrophe, that the very systems Ritz had designed to create perfection would also enable systematic theft, that the partnership forged in mutual ambition would end in mutual destruction. The Savoy was open. The future had begun, and so had the fraud. Chapter 4. The books that never quite balanced. Within 6 months of opening, the Savoy's wine cellar showed inventory discrepancies that the accountants quietly flagged but could not explain. The numbers were small at first. 3 cases of Chateau Lafite Rothschild ordered, but only 2 cases recorded in consumption. 5 crates of Moet et Chandon purchased in November, but inventory showing 4 crates remaining by December. Foie gras orders exceeding menu requirements by 15%. The accountants brought their concerns to the board in early 1890. The discrepancies totaled perhaps £200 across 6 months, a trivial sum for a hotel generating revenues of £70,000 annually. The board reviewed the reports and filed them away. Inventory tracking was notoriously imperfect. Bottles broke. Accounting errors occurred. Staff occasionally helped themselves to kitchen supplies. This was the hospitality industry. Petty theft was expected. What they did not understand was that they were witnessing the beginning of a systematic operation designed by men who understood accounting as thoroughly as they understood service. César Ritz and Auguste Escoffier had developed a beautifully simple scheme. They would order luxury goods in quantities appropriate for a hotel of the Savoy's prestige, but slightly excessive relative to actual consumption. The excess would be diverted, sometimes to Ritz's own residence, sometimes to restaurants Ritz was secretly planning to open, sometimes sold directly to private buyers at full retail price, with Ritz pocketing the proceeds. The genius of the scheme was that it exploited the very systems Ritz had created. The Savoy operated at such high volume and maintained such extensive inventory that tracking individual bottles or cuts of meat was effectively impossible. Ritz had designed the supply chain for efficiency, not accountability. Orders flowed through multiple hands. Deliveries arrived constantly. The kitchen operated at such intensity that precise inventory control seemed pedantic. Ritz had also cultivated personal relationships with every major supplier in London. Wine merchants trusted him absolutely. Butchers gave him preferential treatment. When Ritz placed orders, they assumed those orders reflected genuine hotel needs. The idea that he might be systematically over-ordering for personal profit simply did not occur to them. By 1892, the operation had expanded considerably. The wine cellar discrepancies now totaled approximately £800 annually, but wine represented only one stream. Escoffier was diverting premium ingredients from the kitchen: truffles, caviar, aged beef, ortolans, all the luxury items that wealthy diners expected, but that could not be precisely tracked in a high-volume operation. The two men had also begun trading on the Savoy's reputation for their own ventures. Ritz was consulting for other hotels across Europe, often during hours when he was supposedly managing the Savoy. He was stockpiling furniture, linens, and china, purchased through Savoy accounts, but destined for hotels he planned to open himself. Escoffier was selling recipes developed in the Savoy kitchen to competitors. What made the scheme particularly effective was psychological. Ritz's reputation for perfectionism meant that no one questioned his orders. If Ritz demanded 16 cases of champagne for a particular week, it was assumed that 16 cases were necessary to maintain the Savoy's standards. His judgment was considered infallible. Questioning him seemed like questioning excellence itself. The board received accounting reports quarterly. The reports consistently showed minor inventory discrepancies, but always within margins that seemed explainable through normal operational variation. Revenue was growing. Occupancy rates remained above 90%. The restaurant was booked solid. Every external indicator suggested triumph. But buried in the numbers was a troubling pattern. The Savoy was magnificently profitable on paper, and generating returns that exceeded D'Oyly Carte's projections. Yet the actual cash available for reinvestment was consistently lower than expected. The hotel was spending slightly more than it should across every category: wine, food, linens, supplies. Not enough to trigger immediate alarm, but enough to create a slow, steady drain. By 1894, the cumulative theft had reached approximately £5,000, equivalent to roughly £600,000 in modern currency. Still not enough to threaten the hotel's operations, but enough that a careful auditor would have recognized the pattern. The tragedy was that D'Oyly Carte himself began to suspect something was wrong, but could not bring himself to investigate aggressively. Ritz had made the Savoy legendary. Ritz's name was now synonymous with the hotel's reputation. To accuse Ritz of theft risked destroying the very brand that made the Savoy valuable. So Carte waited. He reviewed the reports. He noted the discrepancies, and he did nothing. Because investigating meant potentially losing the man who had created modern luxury hospitality. And without Ritz, what was the Savoy but another expensive building? The fraud continued, hidden in plain sight, protected by the brilliance of the men committing it. Chapter 5. The Gentleman's Agreement That Wasn't Gentle. D'Oyly Carte's board of directors met in private in April 1896 and reviewed financial reports that showed the Savoy was magnificently profitable, yet mysteriously cash poor. The meeting took place in a paneled room overlooking the Thames. Present were 6 men. D'Oyly Carte himself, now visibly aged and increasingly concerned about his legacy. 2 investors who had provided capital for the hotel's construction. The hotel's chief accountant. And 2 members of London's financial establishment brought in to provide independent assessment. The accountant presented the data with careful precision. The Savoy's revenue for 1895 had exceeded £90,000. Occupancy rates remained exceptional. The restaurant generated profits that rivaled the rooms themselves. By every standard measure, the hotel was a spectacular success. Yet the actual cash reserves were substantially lower than projected. The hotel was spending approximately 12% more on operating costs than similar establishments. The inventory costs were particularly troubling. Wine expenditures exceeded consumption by margins that could not be explained by normal waste. Food costs showed similar patterns. The independent financial advisors delivered their assessment. Either the hotel's accounting systems were fundamentally flawed, creating illusory discrepancies, or someone was systematically diverting resources for personal benefit. The room fell silent. Everyone present understood the implications. If the accounting was flawed, it could be fixed. But if theft was occurring, the likely perpetrators were the very people who made the hotel successful. Investigating meant potentially destroying the institution they were trying to protect. D'Oyly Carte faced an impossible choice. He could not fire Ritz without evidence. And obtaining evidence required investigation that would inevitably become public. Hotels operated on reputation. If word spread that the Savoy suspected its own management of embezzlement, the scandal would devastate the brand. Wealthy guests did not patronize establishments embroiled in criminal investigations. Yet doing nothing meant allowing the theft to continue, watching the hotel's capital slowly bleed away while maintaining a facade of success. The board made a compromise decision. They would increase accounting oversight without announcing an investigation. They would require more detailed inventory reports. They would rotate supplier relationships to make diversions more difficult. They would watch Ritz carefully, looking for concrete evidence of misconduct. What they did not realize was that Ritz had anticipated this response. He understood institutional thinking. He knew the board valued reputation above all else. He calculated correctly that they would hesitate to act decisively unless presented with irrefutable proof. So he continued the scheme, but with increased sophistication. He spread the theft across more categories, making individual discrepancies smaller and harder to detect. He diversified suppliers so that no single merchant received suspiciously large orders. He cultivated even stronger personal relationships with the board members themselves, reinforcing his image as indispensable. By late 1896, the operation had reached industrial scale. Ritz and Escoffier were essentially running two parallel operations, the legitimate Savoy Hotel and their own private supply network that parasitized Savoy resources. They were planning to open competing hotels in Paris and London. They were accumulating inventory for these ventures through Savoy accounts. They were using Savoy relationships to negotiate favorable terms with suppliers. The board suspected, but suspicion is not evidence. And evidence requires investigation. And investigation requires courage that the board did not possess. This was the central irony of the situation. The Savoy had been built on D'Oyly Carte's willingness to take unprecedented risks with technology and concept. But faced with fraud, the same institution became paralyzed by conventional thinking. They could not imagine the hotel succeeding without Ritz. Therefore, they could not investigate Ritz. Therefore, they remained trapped in a situation where their own success was being systematically undermined. Meanwhile, the guests saw none of this. They saw only flawless service, magnificent cuisine, unmatched luxury. The Savoy's reputation continued to grow. The Prince of Wales dined there regularly. International celebrities made it their London residence. The hotel defined modern hospitality. Underneath the marble and electric light, the book still did not balance. The wine cellar still showed discrepancies. The food costs still exceeded reasonable margins. And the board still met in private rooms, reviewing reports that told them what they already knew but could not bring themselves to confront. Something would have to break. The question was whether it would be the hotel or the men destroying it. Chapter 6: The Audit That Changed Everything. In February 1898, the board hired private investigators to follow the Savoy suppliers and trace where the missing inventory was actually going. The decision came after D'Oyly Carte's patience finally broke. The cumulative losses had reached approximately £8,000, perhaps more. The pattern was undeniable. Confronting it meant risking everything the Savoy represented, but continuing to ignore it meant presiding over systematic theft. The investigators were a discreet firm used by London's financial institutions for sensitive matters. They did not announce their presence. They simply began tracking deliveries, interviewing suppliers under pretense of routine business inquiries, following shipments to their final destinations. What they discovered exceeded the board's worst suspicions. Ritz and Escoffier had constructed an elaborate network. Wine ordered for the Savoy was being diverted to a warehouse Ritz controlled in South London. Premium ingredients were being redirected to restaurants Ritz was preparing to open. Furniture and linens purchased through Savoy accounts were being stockpiled for the Hotel Ritz that César was planning for Paris. The investigators documented specific instances. In January 1898 alone, the Savoy had ordered 40 cases of vintage champagne. Only 32 cases were delivered to the hotel's cellars. The remaining 8 cases went to Ritz's private storage. Similar patterns appeared across every luxury category. Caviar, truffles, aged wines, premium beef, they all showed the same template. Over-ordering on Savoy accounts, partial delivery to the hotel, diversion of the excess. But the most damaging discovery was that Ritz and Escoffier had recruited accomplices. 16 other staff members, from wine stewards to sous chefs to purchasing managers, were participating in the scheme. They received payments from Ritz for their cooperation. The entire senior management structure had been corrupted. The investigators also traced Ritz's finances. He was living far beyond what his salary could support. He maintained a lavish residence. He traveled constantly across Europe, ostensibly on Savoy business, but actually negotiating deals for his own ventures. He was using the Savoy's reputation and resources as leverage to build a competing hotel empire. The evidence was irrefutable. The board met on February 28, 1898. The investigators presented their findings in comprehensive detail. Dates, amounts, suppliers, delivery addresses, financial transactions. The theft was systematic, deliberate, sustained over nearly a decade. D'Oyly Carte sat through the presentation in silence. This was the man he had trusted absolutely, the genius who had made the Savoy legendary, revealed as a criminal who had been stealing from his own creation since the beginning. The board faced a final decision. They could prosecute, turning the matter over to police and accepting the public scandal. Or they could handle it privately, dismissing Ritz and Escoffier quietly, containing the damage to reputation. The choice was obvious. Prosecution meant headlines, criminal trials. The Savoy's name dragged through scandal. Wealthy guests reading about embezzlement investigations over breakfast. Competitors exploiting the chaos. The entire carefully constructed brand demolished by legal proceedings. So they chose silence. Ritz would be fired for gross misconduct. Escoffier and the other conspirators would be dismissed simultaneously. The official statement would describe a mutual parting of ways, management disagreements, natural transitions. No mention of theft, no criminal charges, just a carefully worded press release and immediate removal of everyone involved. The decision was made on March 8, 1898. The confrontation would occur the next day. What the board did not fully consider was the human dimension of what they were about to do. They were not simply firing an employee. They were destroying the man who had invented modern luxury hospitality, They were ending the career of someone whose name was synonymous with excellence. They were confronting a perfectionist with evidence of his own systematic fraud. César Ritz had built his entire identity on being irreplaceable, on anticipating needs, on creating flawless experiences. His self-worth derived from professional excellence. The revelation that he had been stealing from his own masterpiece would not simply end his employment, it would shatter his understanding of himself. The investigators filed their final report. The evidence was compiled. The termination letters were prepared. On the 9th of March, 1898, César Ritz would walk through the Savoy's lobby for the last time, carrying in his pocket the letter that destroyed his world. Chapter 7. The Firing That Never Made the Papers. On the 9th of March, 1898, César Ritz was dismissed for gross misconduct, but the official statement described it as a mutual parting of ways. The confrontation occurred in the same paneled room where the board had debated his fate. Present were D'Oyly Carte, the chief accountant, and 2 board members who served as witnesses. Ritz arrived believing he had been summoned for a routine operational meeting. The chief accountant presented the evidence, dates and amounts, supplier statements, delivery records, financial transactions that traced Savoy purchases to Ritz's private warehouses. The documentation was comprehensive and irrefutable. Ritz's reaction, as recorded in board minutes preserved in the Savoy archives, was initially shock, followed by indignation. He did not deny the facts. Instead, he attempted to justify them. This was standard practice in hotel management, he argued. Everyone supplemented their income through supplier relationships. The margins were industry norm. His consulting work benefited the Savoy by enhancing his expertise. The diversions were trivial relative to the revenue he generated. D'Oyly Carte responded with a single question. Had Ritz obtained authorization for any of these transactions? Silence. The legal position was clear. Ritz had systematically diverted Savoy resources for personal profit without disclosure or permission. The cumulative value exceeded £8,000, a felony theft under British law. The board had grounds for immediate prosecution, but prosecution was not their goal. They wanted Ritz gone, the scandal contained, the hotel's reputation preserved. They presented terms. Ritz would resign immediately, effective this day. He would sign a statement acknowledging misconduct and agreeing never to discuss the matter publicly. In exchange, the board would not pursue criminal charges. The official announcement would cite management disagreements and mutual agreement to part ways. Ritz attempted negotiation. Could he remain until a successor was found? The answer was no. Could he issue a farewell statement to staff? No. Could he at least say goodbye to the kitchen team? Absolutely not. He was given 2 hours to clear his personal effects and leave the premises. Security would accompany him to ensure he removed only items that belonged to him personally. He was forbidden from speaking to any staff members. He was to exit through the service entrance to avoid guests. The board minutes record that Ritz accepted these terms in a state of visible shock. He signed the required documents. He left the room. Simultaneously, Auguste Escoffier was being confronted with identical evidence in the kitchen offices. His reaction was reportedly more pragmatic. He acknowledged the facts, signed the termination agreement, and departed without protest. He understood that fighting was pointless when the evidence was conclusive. Over the next 4 hours, 16 other staff members were systematically dismissed. Wine stewards who had facilitated diversions, purchasing managers who had processed fraudulent orders, sous chefs who had redirected ingredients. The purge was comprehensive and swift. By evening, the Savoy's entire senior management structure had been eliminated. The hotel that had defined modern luxury hospitality had dismissed the team that created it, all within a single business day. The official statement was released that afternoon. It read, in full, "The management of the Savoy Hotel announces that Mr. César Ritz and Mr. Auguste Escoffier have resigned their positions effective immediately. The board thanks them for their service and wishes them well in their future endeavors." No mention of theft, no reference to misconduct, no acknowledgement that Britain's most celebrated hotelier had been fired for embezzlement. The press reported the story as a minor personnel change. The Times gave it 3 sentences. The hospitality industry noted it with surprise, but no particular alarm. The cover-up succeeded perfectly. Ritz's reputation remained intact in the public eye. The Savoy avoided scandal. The suppliers who had unknowingly participated in the fraud were never told what had occurred. The guests sipping champagne in the restaurant that evening had no idea they were dining in a hotel whose entire leadership had just been destroyed. César Ritz walked out the service entrance, carrying a small case of personal belongings. He was 48 years old. 9 years earlier, he had entered this building as the most celebrated manager in European hospitality. Now he departed as a disgraced thief who had systematically defrauded his own creation. The electric light still blazed in the Savoy's windows. The hotel continued operating without interruption, but the man who had made those lights synonymous with luxury was gone. His legacy already being rewritten to exclude the uncomfortable truth. What happened next would take years to unfold, but the trajectory was set. Ritz would attempt to rebuild. The shame and pressure would destroy him. And the Savoy would discover whether greatness could survive the removal of the men who created it. Chapter 8: Escoffier's Exodus and the Kitchen Conspiracy. Auguste Escoffier was fired the same day, along with 16 other managers and staff who had participated in the theft operation. The kitchen conspiracy was more extensive than even the board had initially understood. Escoffier had not simply diverted ingredients. He had built a parallel economy within the Savoy's operations, a system where every major purchase generated revenue streams independent of the hotel itself. The investigation revealed the structure in detail. Escoffier had established relationships with premium suppliers across Europe. When the Savoy ordered luxury ingredients, those suppliers would invoice for full quantities but deliver slightly less, splitting the difference with Escoffier. A 30-pound order of foie gras would be invoiced at 30 pounds but delivered at 28 pounds. The supplier would pocket the difference, kick back a percentage to Escoffier, and everyone profited except the Savoy. This pattern extended across every premium category: truffles from Périgord, caviar from Russia, champagne from Reims, beef from Scotland. Each supplier relationship concealed a margin that Escoffier controlled. The cumulative effect was massive. Conservative estimates suggest Escoffier diverted approximately 3,000 pounds worth of goods over 9 years, roughly 350,000 pounds in modern currency. But the financial theft was only part of the operation. Escoffier had also been systematically stealing intellectual property. Every recipe he developed in the Savoy kitchen technically belonged to the hotel. Yet Escoffier had been selling these recipes to competing restaurants across Europe. The signature dishes that made the Savoy famous were being served in Paris, Vienna, and Rome, generating revenue that flowed to Escoffier personally. He had also trained an entire generation of chefs using the Savoy's resources, then placed them in competing establishments where they cooked Savoy-style cuisine, while Escoffier received consulting fees. The Savoy was essentially operating as an unwitting training academy for its own competition. The 16 dismissed staff members represented every level of the operation. Louis Echenard, the head wine steward, had facilitated the wine diversions and maintained the dual inventory records that concealed them. Monsieur Viraud, the assistant restaurant manager, had processed the fraudulent supplier invoices. Multiple sous chefs had participated in the ingredient diversions. What made the conspiracy particularly effective was that these were the Savoy's most competent employees. They were the staff who made the hotel function at the level guests expected. Dismissing them created an immediate operational crisis. The board faced an impossible situation. They had eliminated the entire team that understood how to operate at Savoy standards. Finding replacements would take months. Training them to Ritz's exacting standards might take years. The hotel risked collapse, not from the theft itself, but from the institutional knowledge destroyed by the necessary purge. D'Oyly Carte made emergency arrangements. He promoted junior managers into senior positions. He recruited experienced hotel staff from across London. He brought in consultants from continental hotels. The scramble was desperate and chaotic. The remarkable thing was that it worked. The Savoy systems proved more resilient than anyone expected. Ritz had created operational procedures so precise, so well documented, that they could survive the removal of the people who designed them. The hotel continued functioning. Service quality declined slightly, but not catastrophically. Guests noticed minor differences, but nothing that drove them to competitors. This revealed something profound about what Ritz and Escoffier had actually built. Their genius was not just personal talent, but systematization. They had created protocols that transformed hospitality from craft into replicable process. The theft was individual criminality, but the systems were institutional assets that transcended their creators. Escoffier himself departed London immediately. He had no interest in prolonging the confrontation. He returned to Paris and began planning the Hotel Ritz that he and César would open there. The scandal did not follow him across the channel. His reputation remained intact. Within 2 years, he would publish his culinary masterwork, Le Guide Culinaire, which systematized French cooking and became the foundational text of modern gastronomy. The irony was complete. The man fired from the Savoy for theft would go on to define professional cooking for the next century. His techniques would become standard in every serious restaurant. His organizational principles would structure commercial kitchens worldwide. The thief became the authority. The fraud became the foundation. Meanwhile, at the Savoy, the kitchen continued operating. New chefs learned the systems Escoffier had created. New managers maintained the service standards Ritz had established. The hotel survived its own purge because the genius of its founders had been institutionalized into procedures that outlasted them. But 2 men remained at the center of the story. D'Oyly Carte, watching his creation survive, despite losing the team that built it, and César Ritz, about to discover that being fired for embezzlement was only the beginning of his destruction. Chapter 9. The Breakdown of the King of Hoteliers. By 1902, César Ritz suffered a complete mental and physical collapse, the direct result of shame, overwork, and the knowledge that his greatest achievement had been built on fraud. The 4 years after his dismissal from the Savoy were a desperate attempt to rebuild what he had lost. Ritz threw himself into creating the Hotel Ritz Paris, determined to prove that his genius transcended his disgrace. The hotel opened in June 1900 on Place Vendôme, and it was immediately recognized as a masterpiece. Ritz had learned from the Savoy. The Paris Ritz featured the same integration of technology and service, the same invisible systems creating visible luxury, but it also incorporated innovations: ensuite bathrooms in every room, telephones, a level of personalized service that exceeded even Savoy standards. The hotel attracted European royalty and American millionaires. It became the most prestigious address in Paris overnight. But success was not enough to quiet what had happened. Ritz drove himself with manic intensity, working 20-hour days, obsessively managing every detail. He could not delegate. He could not rest. He was haunted by the knowledge that his reputation was built on a foundation of theft and lies. The cover-up had succeeded too well. The public never learned why Ritz left the Savoy. His reputation remained pristine. But Ritz himself knew. He understood that his fame was fraudulent, that the name César Ritz meant excellence built on embezzlement. The contradiction consumed him. He began experiencing severe anxiety, panic attacks, insomnia. He would arrive at the hotel before dawn and inspect every room, checking details that staff had already verified. He trusted no one. He questioned everything. The perfectionism that had made him successful metastasized into pathological control. His wife Marie watched him deteriorate. She begged him to rest, to delegate, to acknowledge human limits. Ritz refused. Rest meant confronting what he had done. Activity meant suppressing the shame. So he worked compulsively, driving himself toward a collapse everyone around him could see coming. In 1902, the breakdown arrived. Ritz suffered what contemporary doctors described as a complete nervous collapse, likely what we would now recognize as severe depression combined with anxiety disorder. He became unable to work, unable to make decisions, unable to function. He was confined to a sanatorium in Switzerland. Doctors prescribed rest and isolation. Ritz spent months in treatment, his mind fragmenting under the weight of shame and exhaustion. The man who had created modern hospitality could no longer tolerate being in his own hotels. Marie Ritz took over management of the Paris hotel. She proved remarkably capable, maintaining the standards César had established, while demonstrating a capacity for delegation he had never possessed. The hotel thrived under her leadership, which must have deepened César's psychological torment. Even his own wife could run his creation better than he could. César Ritz never fully recovered. He would spend the remaining 16 years of his life moving between sanatoriums and his home, experiencing periods of lucidity interrupted by episodes of complete mental collapse. He became a ghost haunting his own legacy, physically present but psychologically absent. The final irony was that his reputation continued to grow during his decline. The Paris Ritz became more successful each year. Other hotels bearing the Ritz name opened across Europe. The name became synonymous with luxury itself. Putting on the Ritz entered popular language as a phrase meaning to display elegance and wealth. But the man himself was destroyed. The shame that drove him to work himself into collapse never released its grip. He could not escape the knowledge that his genius had been inseparable from his criminality, that the systems he created to deliver perfect service had also enabled perfect theft. César Ritz died in October 1918, aged 68, his mind long since broken. The obituaries praised him as the father of modern hospitality. They described his innovations in service and luxury. they celebrated the hotels that bore his name. None mentioned the embezzlement. None referenced the Savoy scandal. The cover-up had succeeded so completely that the fraud had been erased from history. His breakdown reveals the psychological cost of building greatness on deception. Ritz could not live with the contradiction between his public reputation and his private knowledge. The perfectionist who demanded flawless execution from others could not forgive himself for systematic theft. The obsession that made him successful became the instrument of his destruction. The Savoy had fired him in 1898, but the real destruction took 4 years to manifest and 16 years to complete. By the time César Ritz died, the hotels bearing his name had eclipsed the Savoy in prestige. But the man himself had been consumed by the very ambition that created them. Chapter 10. How the Savoy survived its own scandal. The Savoy Hotel not only survived the purge of its entire management team, it thrived, proving that the system mattered more than the men who built it. The immediate aftermath of the March 1898 dismissals was chaos. The hotel had lost its general manager, head chef, wine steward, and 16 other key staff in a single day. The operational knowledge those individuals possessed seemed irreplaceable. Industry observers predicted the Savoy would struggle to maintain its standards. Instead, something remarkable happened. The systems Ritz had created proved more durable than his personal presence. The service protocols, the kitchen organization, the supplier relationships, all continued functioning because they had been documented and institutionalized. Ritz's genius was not just in executing perfect hospitality, but in creating replicable processes. D'Oyly Carte moved quickly to stabilize the situation. He promoted capable junior managers into senior roles. He brought in experienced professionals from continental hotels to fill gaps. Most importantly, he maintained absolute silence about why the dismissals had occurred. Staff were told only that management disagreements had led to changes. The theft was never mentioned internally. This silence was psychologically essential. If employees had known their leadership had been systematically stealing, the moral authority of the institution would have collapsed. Instead, they continued operating as though the Savoy's excellence was uncompromised. Within 6 months, the hotel had stabilized. Service quality returned to previous standards. The restaurant maintained its reputation. Occupancy rates remained strong. Guests noticed the transition only as a change in familiar faces, not as a decline in quality. The real test came in the following years. Would the Savoy remain competitive without the celebrity management that had defined it? The answer was definitively yes. The hotel continued to dominate London's luxury market. It adapted to changing tastes. It maintained its reputation for innovation. Part of this success reflected D'Oyly Carte's decision to invest heavily in maintaining the physical plant and technological systems. The electric lighting, the hydraulic elevators, the plumbing infrastructure, all were kept meticulously maintained. The building itself became the brand, more than any individual manager. The hotel also benefited from its established position. By 1898, the Savoy was a London institution. Wealthy travelers defaulted to booking there. The Prince of Wales continued dining in the restaurant. The Savoy had achieved the rare status of being irreplaceable in the social geography of the city. But the survival also revealed something more fundamental. Luxury hospitality is ultimately about systems, not individuals. Ritz had created protocols so precise that they could be executed by competent professionals following documented procedures. His genius was systematization, and systems outlast individuals. D'Oyly Carte himself died in 1901, only 3 years after the Ritz dismissals. His son Rupert, D'Oyly Carte, took control and proved equally capable of managing the enterprise. The hotel passed from one generation to the next without disruption. Through World War I, the Savoy adapted to wartime conditions while maintaining its reputation. Through the 1920s, it became the center of London's social scene. Through economic depressions and wars, the hotel survived by being institutionally resilient rather than dependent on individual genius. The lesson was clear. Ritz and Escoffier had been brilliant, but they had also been replaceable. The institution they built transcended them. The fraud they committed had been contained and overcome. The Savoy proved that organizations can survive the removal of corrupted founders if the systems those founders created are sound. This was perhaps the final irony. Ritz had stolen from the Savoy, believing himself indispensable. The hotel proved him wrong by thriving after his removal. His greatest legacy was creating something that did not need him. The Savoy still operates today, more than a century after opening. It has survived world wars, economic collapse, changes in ownership, and transformation of the hospitality industry. It endures not because of the men who created it, but because of what they created. A system that institutionalized excellence. Chapter 11. The secret that shaped the Ritz legend. The full truth about Ritz's embezzlement remained hidden for decades, allowing his posthumous reputation to grow unchallenged into myth. The cover-up succeeded beyond the Savoy Board's expectations. The decision to handle Ritz's dismissal privately, avoiding criminal prosecution and public scandal, meant that the true reason for his departure never entered the historical record. Contemporary newspapers reported only that Ritz and Escoffier had left the Savoy due to management disagreements. This silence created space for alternative narratives. Within hospitality circles, a rumor circulated that Ritz had been driven out by jealous board members who resented his success. That D'Oyly Carte had wanted more control and eliminated a rival. That creative differences over the hotel's direction had led to an inevitable parting. None of these stories mentioned theft. None referenced embezzlement. The fraud was so completely concealed that even industry insiders never learned what actually happened. Marie Ritz, César's widow, played a crucial role in shaping his posthumous legacy. After his death in 1918, she took complete control of the Ritz hotel empire. She proved to be an exceptional manager, expanding the brand while maintaining quality standards. But she also carefully controlled César's historical narrative. In 1938, Marie published a biography of her husband titled César Ritz, Host to the World. The book portrayed him as a visionary genius, a perfectionist who transformed luxury hospitality, a man whose standards were so exacting that lesser minds could not appreciate him. The Savoy dismissal was described as a clash between artistic vision and commercial pragmatism. The embezzlement was never mentioned. The biography became the definitive source for Ritz's life story. Subsequent historians relied on Marie's account because primary documents were not publicly available. The Savoy's board minutes and investigative reports remained locked in private archives. Marie controlled access to César's personal papers and correspondence. The result was a legend built on selective memory. Ritz became the patron saint of hospitality. He's the man who invented modern service, whose name meant excellence. Business schools taught case studies about his management philosophy. Hospitality programs used his methods as foundational training. Meanwhile, the truth remained buried. The Savoy itself had no interest in reviving the scandal. Revealing that their founding genius had been an embezzler would serve no purpose except damaging their own reputation. So they maintained the fiction that Ritz had simply moved on to other ventures. The concealment was so effective that when the Hotel Ritz Paris celebrated its centennial in 2000, the official histories made no mention of the Savoy theft. The embezzlement had been so thoroughly erased that it ceased to exist even in archival consciousness. So only in recent decades have historians gained access to the Savoy's internal documents. The board minutes from 1898, the investigator reports, the termination agreements, all reveal what actually happened. But by then, the Ritz legend had been established for a century. The truth could not displace the myth. This creates a profound question about historical memory. César Ritz genuinely did revolutionize luxury hospitality. His innovations in service, his systems thinking, his understanding of guest psychology, all were transformative contributions. The fact that he also systematically stole from the institution he built does not erase those innovations. But it complicates the legacy. How do we evaluate genius that coexists with fraud? How do we remember someone whose brilliance was inseparable from criminality? The Ritz legend offers one answer. We simply choose to forget the parts that contradict the narrative we prefer. The hotels bearing the Ritz name continue operating worldwide. They represent luxury, excellence, impeccable service. Few guests know that the founder was fired for embezzlement. Fewer still know that his mental breakdown was driven by shame over the fraud. The legend persists because it serves purposes that the truth does not. César Ritz became immortal by having his crimes erased from memory. The irony is that this erasure was itself a form of the perfectionism he practiced in life. Just as he created flawless hotel experiences by making problems invisible, his widow created a flawless legacy by making the scandal invisible. That the man who understood that luxury requires concealing imperfection had that same principle applied to his own historical memory. What guests never saw during his life, history would never see after his death. Chapter 12. The Palace Built on Light and Lies. Today, the Savoy still stands on the Strand, its electric lights still burning, its past still half hidden beneath layers of polished marble and official history. Walking through the current Savoy, now operated by Fairmont Hotels after extensive renovation, you encounter an institution that has survived everything history could deliver. 2 world wars, economic depressions, changes in ownership, transformation of the hospitality industry from craft to corporate enterprise. The building endures, meticulously maintained, still prestigious, still expensive, still defining luxury for a certain class of traveler. The electric lights that made the hotel famous on opening night have been replaced countless times, but they still illuminate the same lobby. The technology has evolved from incandescent bulbs to LED fixtures, but the principle remains: electric light as symbol of modernity, of progress, of the future made visible. Yet underneath that illumination, the hotel's founding contradiction persists. The Savoy was built on 2 incompatible truths. It represented genuine innovation in hospitality, authentic advances in service and comfort that changed how luxury hotels operated worldwide. And it was also the site of systematic fraud, a criminal enterprise run by its own management, theft concealed beneath layers of excellence. This duality is not unique to the Savoy. It reflects a broader pattern in how great institutions are built. Ambition drives innovation, but ambition also justifies exploitation. The same psychological qualities that enable someone to create something unprecedented also enable them to believe they deserve more than institutional rules permit. Richard D'Oyly Carte wanted to build the future. He succeeded. The Savoy introduced technologies and service standards that became industry norm. But he built it by trusting a man who could not resist stealing from his own creation. César Ritz wanted to be irreplaceable. He succeeded. His name became eternal, synonymous with luxury itself. But the perfection he demanded from others, he could not maintain in himself. The systems he created to deliver flawless service also enabled flawless theft. The story poses uncomfortable questions about how we evaluate achievement. If an institution creates genuine value while concealing systematic fraud, how should we remember it? If a founder revolutionizes an industry while embezzling from investors, does the innovation justify the crime? Or does the crime invalidate the innovation? The Savoy's answer seems to be that both things can be true simultaneously. The hotel was built by criminals. The hotel created lasting value. These facts coexist without resolving. Modern guests checking into the Savoy encounter none of this history. They see only the current incarnation, a beautifully maintained historic hotel offering contemporary luxury. The marble floors reflect their images, just as they reflected César Ritz's distorted figure on his final day. The electric lights shine just as brilliantly as they did on opening night in 1889. But the palace stands on foundations that few examine. The beauty is real. The luxury is authentic. The service maintains standards established more than a century ago. And all of it was created by men who systematically stole from the institution they built. This is the lesson the Savoy offers. That greatness and corruption are not opposites, but often companions. That the monuments we admire frequently stand on foundations we prefer not to acknowledge. That institutional memory is selective, preserving what enhances reputation and discarding what complicates it. César Ritz walked through the Savoy lobby for the last time carrying a letter that called him an embezzler. Today, his name means excellence. It's Richard D'Oyly Carte built a hotel that defined modern luxury. Today, few remember he fired his entire founding team for theft. The building survives. The truth remains half hidden. The electric lights still burn above the Strand, illuminating a palace built on brilliance and fraud, on innovation and theft, on dreams and deception. The Savoy endures because we choose to remember only the parts of its history that inspire us. The rest remains in shadows, visible only to those willing to look beneath the surface. And perhaps that is the final irony. A hotel built to illuminate luxury through electric light has spent more than a century keeping its darkest truths in shadow. The palace of light remains also a palace of lies, magnificent and troubling, beautiful and corrupt, and standing as testament to the uncomfortable truth that our greatest achievements often rest on foundations we would rather not examine. The question is not whether we can separate the brilliance from the fraud. The question is whether we are honest enough to acknowledge they were always the same thing.